Let the sun shine. Let the sun shine. Let the sun shine.
Hey, what's happening, mama?
Hey, love, how are you?
I'm good. I can't complain. It's a
I
great
love the t-shirts. Bison for life.
Bison for life. You can get it.
Mr. President, our fearless leader.
I feel as though you can get it anywhere at let me tell you where you can get it. You
Yes,
can
do
get it
tell.
at hbcucollection.com.
Okay.
And I'll put that up for those
Yeah,
people.
please put that. I need that in my life. I like it.
Yes. And you can
hbcucollections.com.
Yeah, it allows everybody to you can go and get all kind of HBCU gear. They're sponsoring the show tonight, and we're gonna make it happen for them. So,
Awesome.
how's everything on your end?
What'd you say, babe?
How's everything on your end?
Good. I can't complain. You know, I get to work from home and do what I love to do. And, listen, my motto, I used to say this when I was the servant leader for the Sexual Abuse Survivors Ministry. And I would say, I come tired and I leave inspired. So,
Really good. That's really good.
Yeah.
Really good. I like that. So we got a good show for these people tonight. Everybody that's out there, without the one and only Dr. Argie Allen Wilson. She is in the house. And
my virtual kiss for everybody in your crew.
There you go.
The Shirley Lewis Show.
There you go. It's been a long day for me because I'm telling you, man, it's just like work. And now everybody's back in New York, but people are still suffering. And now everybody's trying to think about what we're going to do for getting parents having anxiety about school and getting kids back to school. So that's our conversation today. And, what do we do based on the fact that we got so many people, so many states now? We have over 40 states where we have spikes in COVID cases. And so today, I was just looking at the numbers today in New York City. Can you imagine this? New York City alone, there are only 250 cases of COVID in New York City.
In New York City, that's amazing.
200.
I say Cuomo for president. That's what I say. Because y'all's governor just did the darn thing. Did an amazing job. And no deaths, right? Yesterday was no deaths in New York City.
No deaths on Saturday, no deaths on Sunday. The whole state had 557 cases, but then the U.S. had 58,000 cases. And then Florida reported 132 deaths yesterday, surpassing everything. Philly decided that they wanted to prohibit large public gatherings until February of 2021.
No big parties for us. I guess Made in America is not happening, or any of those kinds of things. Not happening.
21. Here you go. 2020 is canceled. And
2020 canceled. And the beginning of 2021 is canceled too. So people need to adjust themselves accordingly.
It's true. And then we got 43 new cases. Oh, no. New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey added 4 more states to ban coming to New York on a 14-day quarantine, which was Minnesota, New Mexico, Ohio, and Wisconsin.
So if they come to New York, they have to do a 14-day quarantine?
Correct.
How do you monitor that?
I really don't know, but it's just something that probably to throw out to people. So just in case you do come, well, from hotels and stuff like that, if you come to a hotel, then you got to stay quarantined. But I guess if you're living with a friend or whatever the case may be, I don't know. It's really kind of hard to dictate. But from the travel situation, from airlines, they can do it that way. But also too, there are 195 countries, and we are banned. The U.S. is banned from all of them except 24. So that lets you know where we stand.
They're like, no, don't come. We don't want you.
Exactly. So anyway, let's talk about what we're talking about tonight, which is getting everybody back to school and with a sense of comfort, because I know you're facing a lot of anxiety. Like you said, hey, Bison for Life, as I said, you know me, hbcucollection.com. You can go check it out. So a lot of people don't have a choice, but Betsy DeVos, the Department of Education, she was on Fox News on Sunday trying to say that they were going to force everybody, all kids, to go back to school. And so, which you can't do because it is left up to the states and it's left up to the governors. But they were trying to say that they will withhold federal funding if the state did not allow the kid. I mean, if the state didn't mandate kids to go back to school. So I know you're facing this. What are you feeling from parents? What's happening on your end in your practice and people with kids? Because there are so many different, some people need daycare. Kids were a source of that. We talked about the issue regarding childcare per se, and parents are going back to work now. So if kids are home and they have to be there because they're essential workers, how do they manage that? So I can only imagine that you're facing this. So what's happening on your end?
Yeah, Charlie, everybody is saying the same thing. Everyone's anxious, whether you have small children, whether you have young teenage children, whether you have young adults that are going back to college, and you're sort of trying to figure it out. I find that colleges actually are doing a little bit better job. They're a little bit better in terms of the strategic planning. So I've heard from some of my clients that are at Spelman that only the freshmen are allowed back. I don't know what's going on with Howard, but only the freshmen are allowed back. Everybody else, seniors part-time, and everybody else is online. So a lot of my clients are actually leaving their homes and their parents are finding them apartments near campus so that they can be with their friends, especially if it's their senior year, and yet they'll still be online. So it's sort of a compromise, if you will.
Yeah, I think Howard is doing a mix. They have a 26-page reopening plan, which what they did in DC was they got together with other universities, so they formed a consortium. I think it was either 10 or 13 colleges in DC. So everything from George Washington, American, Georgetown, Trinity, Catholic, you name it, UDC, Gallaudet, all of them. So they will be speaking from the same language. So
Gotcha.
Going back from August 24th to November 24th, currently right now, all the freshmen are coming on campus. But the thing is, it's about how they room with the students. So we're having a housing issue because one, we have the largest freshman class wanting to enter Howard, and it's during COVID. So right now there are currently 2,600 freshmen.
Wow.
That's coming into Howard. That's more than Morehouse and Spelman by itself as a college. So they're not doing any more triples. They're only doing singles and doubles. So it's becoming, an issue that way. But everybody else is allowed, but they're stagnating it based on the size of the class. So if a class is over 30 people, that is a remote class. That class will not have in-class sessions. Also, too, it depends on the professor and the health of the professor. So if the professor is in good health, then they will come to class. But if the professor has asthma or some autoimmune disease, then he or she will be able to do the class online.
Gotcha.
And that's the biggest thing, looking at the faculty, the administration, and the kids, because how prudent the students are going to be with making sure that nobody is infecting the other. So that's the situation. And then how do you socially distance, wash your hands, and all of that when you're a kid and everybody's just going to drop their guard and they're going to want to hug each other, hang out on the yard, do all these things that people do. So go to lunch, be fabulous. The whole thing that, kids do.
Wear your fabulous mask. Get your designer mask. They make them in all colors, all sizes, right?
So I think the school, I think really when you think about it, the schooling is the biggest issue, because I think work companies have really been able to come up with ways to realize, okay, I know how to manage this thing. So many people can come to work between 10 and 1. so many people can come to work after lunch from 2 to 5. That's how it is in my company. You are assigned what time you can go into the office, and you have to sign in, sign out, of course, and all of that. So I think working is not an issue. It's just the unknown of students going back to school, and especially in places like Florida and Texas, Arizona, in Georgia, Alabama, well, now South Carolina, where you have all these hot spots trying to get in. So what are your parents?
So a lot of the parents are, of course, noticeably concerned. What I'm saying to parents is, you got to sit down and have the courageous conversation with your kids, right? You can't be afraid to have those conversations and lay out what the potential risks are, worst case scenario, right? And then back into that, they call it sort of reverse engineering. I'm also encouraging people, what we know is that young children and young adults, right, they're not fully developed. They need consistency, they need predictability, they need structure, and they need us to be honest. Truth, trust, and transparency leads to transformational breakthroughs.
Right.
So I am saying, sit down and have the conversation with your kids. I am not opposed to having parents share their concerns or fears. Not that the children are supposed to handle their parents' emotion, but the parents really do need to say, like, I'm very concerned. I know I want you to have a senior year, or I want you to go back to school. But if they are young adults, have them weigh in on what they feel that they could actually do to help themselves to be healthy, help themselves not to contract this disease or give to anybody else. I'm also saying, come up with contractual agreements. So the contractual agreement before they leave to go back to school, between them, their siblings, their parents. These are the things that I think we need to integrate into our rules of engagement when we go to school and when we come back. Then I'm asking those young people to sit down, even now, in online connection, and have some conversations with their roommates or whomever they're going to be living in the house with about what are the rules of engagement there.
Right.
If we're going to be in our little quarantine pod, right, our crew, then is that okay to have a big party and have other people come over and we don't know whether they've been appropriately socially distancing, if you will? Because what happens is when people actually encounter whatever the issue is, sometimes then they're afraid to speak up because they don't want to be seen as somebody that, is a Debbie Downer, or they don't want somebody to look at them with the side eye. But if you actually sit down and have those agreements on the front end, then you can go back to your contract and say, hey, we had this conversation. We talked about this.
Right. Do you really think people are going to hold true to their contract?
Well, here's the thing. At least it's a document that everybody has signed. And so even if they breach it, it can always be tweaked. It can always be amended. But what people cannot say is that, oh, they didn't know. Or, oh, I had a different perception about what you were talking about. Oh, I forgot. No, it's written down. You've signed it. We all signed it. And if we need to tweak it because maybe we were overzealous and we need to dial it back because things are changed in our community, all right, let's revisit. But at least you have it.
Right. Don said here, what about HIPAA laws? The professors would have to reveal health challenges to stay at home and teach remotely. Is that legal? Don, to answer that question, that's a good question, but I think a lot changed with HIPAA during COVID. Just like telehealth, teletherapy. Yeah, teletherapy and all of that changed during HIPAA law. But also, too, if you're a professor, you're going to let somebody know you have a health issue. You don't have to say what that health issue is.
Right, exactly. You
just need to let the person know that you need to teach the class remotely. So that's one of the things that you're going to have to do. Let's say Latanya said here, what's up, cuz? Just had this conversation with my college senior. How are they going to handle that common area in the apartment and limit visitors? That's interesting. That's the part. That's where it gets tricky, because just like you just said on the latter statement you made, which is, okay, it's okay that we have our social bubble, but then you want to go out into the world and open up, and have a party. How do you know everybody else is doing what they supposed to do?
Exactly. And, the numbers are going up. I was just watching CNN. The numbers are going up for Gen Zs and for millennials. Of course, the numbers of deaths in that category is not elevated, but the number of cases is elevated. And it's my understanding that there's a different strand, some D variants versus E variants or something like that, that actually is like morphing into something else that's impacting the younger population. Because this is how viruses are. They evolve. So yeah, so young people should know that, one, we know that they're not immune. Number two, we know that they're super spreaders because they can be asymptomatic. And three, it's really about education, and it's about staying in the courageous conversation, staying in the dialogue, not just assuming, because that's kind of what happened with the protests right now. Not a lot of people are talking about that. COVID, it's summertime. They assume that it's not out there because the weather's nice. We can't get off this conversation. We have to stay in the conversation, not to be punitive and condescending, not to shame and blame, and not to make it political. This is not about politics. This is about people, and it's about lives, the death or life of a human being, somebody that that you love. And all the game is changed when it hits close to home. Right. So let's try to the best of our ability to make sure that it doesn't. When it comes to those teachers that are having to go back into the schools for the young people, and then they may be taking care of their senior relatives, that's a big mess. This is a little bit of a mess here.
Yeah. So there was an article in the New York Times that was recently stated. It was done by 132 epidemiologists. And they had you guys can go online. I'll put it in the link when we finish, but it kind of goes through different scenarios of when, based on pre-K, based on elementary, based on junior high, when would you send your kids to school? What is it that you can do? And how can you prevent, the spread of the disease? And what would they do in the case of, is it the right time to send their kids to school? And most of them right now are leaning on the fact that it is not, based on where we stand as a country, they would not want to send their kids to school. I think it was like 10%. 40% right now said, I would want to keep my kids at home, and they're still struggling to decide when would be the right time to send their kids to school. So when you have the epidemiologists saying, only 10% saying go to school, where we are. We got a long way to long way to go. And we really only got 4 weeks because, school starts in August for a lot of people, especially down south,
Exactly.
And then you got Florida.
I'm encouraging people to be creative. Start getting creative. And, what sort of got us in this mess is that in some ways we follow and swallow. We kind of listen to information. We don't really process it. Sometimes I find that we're not as analytical as we need to be. We don't question as much as we need to question. And then we just kind of go along to get along. And I'm encouraging people, especially when you have small children or you have seniors that you're dealing with, don't just take that information and just follow suit based on what they're telling you to do. Even if it's the epidemiologist or the experts, do your own research. Have a conversation with, the people that are closest to you. Kind of, assess whether it makes sense to you, and then come up with your plan. Y'all, we talked about this in the very beginning of the quarantine. Your SSR plan, SSR, your safety care plan, your self-care plan, and your relational care plan.
Right.
Those plans have to be tweaked based on what's going on, because we are not in normal times. We are in the midst of 2 pandemics. So we can't function as if everything is copacetic. Everything is what it was. It's not. And if that means that your children, you choose for them not to go back to school, now you have to come up with that safety care plan that encompasses your village. We know all about the village in our community. That may mean that you have somebody come over to take care of your kids when you got to go to work. It may mean that you look into homeschooling in a different way, or some of the online programs that are separate and apart from the actual schools that your children were attending. There can be multiple ways, but we got to start thinking outside the box and get innovative that then will decrease our anxiety, because studies show, Charlie, that when we have a plan, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. When we have a plan in action, it actually decreases our anxiety.
Right.
The anxiety comes from fear of the unknown, worry due to uncertainty, what's going to happen, how's that going to impact me? And if you come up with plan A, B, and C, and A doesn't work and B doesn't work and you can go to C, then literally the anxiety begins to decrease, your cortisol levels begin to decrease, and some of the other hormonal levels that are helpful that allow you to have calm in the midst of the storm begin to elevate.
Right, because I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, as far as making sure that you plan and coming up with alternative plans, because now you've had a chance to think about how you want your kids, how to school your kids. So you said a couple of great things, which was either you're going to have the ability to homeschool or you're not. If you don't have the ability to homeschool, I would suggest that maybe, depending on your job, you have to look at your job situation. And also, too, is it possible that your kid could go stay with another parent and you work off of each other that way, where maybe the kids go and be with the other parent and stay during the week and they come home during the weekend, that type of thing. So then therefore you can understand, okay, well, I can work, and then you just have to talk it out with the parents and really make the situation work if you have to go to work, into the office to work, and can't homeschool. Plus, a lot of parents, just to be honest, a lot of parents don't want to homeschool their kids.
Homeschooling is hard. It's one thing I've definitely seen is that parents have an appreciation for teachers, that teachers are not getting paid nearly enough money for all they have to do to take care of your precious jewels for 6, 7, 8 hours out of the day, and their therapists and their social workers, and they're dealing with their personal hygiene, the hygiene of the kids. They're doing everything. And so now they're realizing, wow, this is a full-time job in addition to my other full-time jobs, and it's not so easy. But we have to pull our resources together and start being more innovative, because we are not in normal times. We should function as if we are at war, because we are. Right.
No, we are. It's true. Lisa said her kids want to spend a couple months with Uncle Charlie.
That's a good one. Right, Charlie?
No. So anyway, here you go. No, that would be a no. What up, Scott? Scott said, get in your, unless I missed it, I'm not hearing a lot about administration and or government about what protocols are in place, i.e. sanitizing common areas, PPE for professors and students. Can you speak to this? Scott, we did talk about it kind of in the beginning with colleges. Colleges are doing a better job than probably right now school systems, because school systems fall under government, and government, as we know, as we can see, is the reason why we haven't flattened the curve in the United States, because government played politics with this thing. Whereas colleges stepped outside of that and said, what is it going to be for us? Because they know they need the money, number one. They want to make sure that they could also, too, a lot of these colleges need the money from sports. Because when you think of the ACC, the SEC, and all of that, they get their money off of those TV contracts for the NCAA March Madness, the pro sports, the college, national championship for football season. And if they don't get those funds, a lot of those administrators and faculty members at those universities are going to have to cut back, either cut back programs, other additional programs, cut back staffing, you name it. You saw in the news where Stanford, which has the second largest or the third largest endowment, cut 11 sports from their athletic programs. And this is a school with an endowment Yeah,
Mhm.
in the billions, in
Mhm.
the billions, and they cut the program. So you had a lot of Ivy League schools cut programs because they're already trying to plan and get ahead and get a jump on it. And then I think a lot of people just wanted to cut programs across the board anyway. So it just gave them an opportune time to, to do it. So we did talk about that. And we talked about each college really has their own reopening plan. I saw one college reopening plan in Georgia, which was more like a memo. But then, like, I saw Howard's reopening plan, which I posted, and I can post that again. It's a 26-page plan where it really goes into detail about when you're in common areas, how you have to act, when you're in classroom settings, how you have to act. If classroom settings are over a percent, like I said, if they're over 30, then it's a remote class. It will not be. So, those big old classes like Psychology 101, those classes are definitely going to be taught online because they don't want all the congregating and stuff of that nature. And then also, too, I think you have to think about, just like Philly just said there will be no large congregation of people until February 2021. So that statement alone affects the colleges and universities in the city of Philadelphia.
That's right. That's right. So all those lecture halls that, hold like 500 thousands of people in the lecture hall, that stuff is going to be online. It
Right.
just will.
Right.
And that's for the betterment of, the students as well as their families and the faculty. I mean, at the end of the day, I think I said, Charlie, in the very beginning of this COVID experience, I said that everyone's goal needs to be to get to the other side of this. Right. And the other side of this, we don't know when that will be. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Mm-hmm. And so if we keep our health intact, I believe that everything else is recoverable. The one thing you cannot recover from is if you're dead. If you're done, you're done. Or if you contracted this virus unbeknownst to yourself and you're asymptomatic, and then you give it to someone else who's more vulnerable, who you love or care about, and you harm them, then that impacts your mental health for the rest of your life as well. So right. I think that we need to take stock in how serious this really is. So when I say we're in a war or we're in a fight, we need to function like that, right? That doesn't mean that, yes, we joke about, summer's canceled or 2020 is canceled, but there's a lot of things that we actually can gain from being reflective around this time that we wouldn't have normally had because we would be busy running and traveling and all of those kind of things.
I think one thing which is important, which I noticed here in New York, New York, being that it was the epicenter and the way it hit the city, we really took on a very different approach. We have a different approach about the virus.
You took it seriously.
We took it seriously, but we witnessed it. We witnessed the sirens, like I said, on repeat. Mm-hmm. Saw the death, you saw the news. It was just for April and May. It was just it hit us hard. So
I would hear the sirens when we would be on show or we'd be talking like rapid fire.
It was just like boom, 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 boom. So you really psychologically, it's the same thing what happened in 9/11, same thing what happened in Sandy, all of those things. So when you go through the storm and all you got to do is wear a mask and wash your hands, and it gets you to the other side as opposed to trying to fight it. Because the bottom line is, it is our normal, and wearing a mask is our normal for at least 2 years.
That's our new norm. Yeah,
it's a normal. And so now for me, it's just like they're in the car. I got extra in the car. I got them in the bag. I got them everywhere. So it's like keys, wallet, phone, and you have mask. So it's those type of things that I think we take it seriously, and why, when you had someone like Cuomo who really drove the point home of, look, this thing is serious.
Leadership.
Yeah. It was just great leadership. So that being said, I know a lot of parents are exhausted, and a lot of people are trying to say, well, should I take my kid out of school and let them go to community college, or should I take them out of school for the first semester and then try to wait this thing out for a vaccine? And
Well, here's the thing about taking your kids out of school. I think that it's possible that you do more harm than good when you do that, because the truth is, although we've gotten some reflective time, this is set 18 weeks into this quarantine. And I think that there's something to be said for our mental health and well-being when we're not being stimulated, or when we have idle time, and when we really feel like we're not doing anything substantial or significant. And that's for any human being, right? Whether even babies have tasks in order to develop and get to a certain developmental level, right? And as older people, we have to work our brains a little bit harder too. And younger people, same thing. We have to work that parasympathetic nervous system in our brain waves in order to continue to move forward. So I'm not one that would be an advocate of pulling your kids out of school. I'm more an advocate of figuring out what your alternatives are while still simultaneously educating. So if that means transitioning to community college, okay, fine, they're in community college, but they're still working. If it means just doing an online platform and they're, and having a little part, if they can afford to have an apartment with their college kids, fine, do that. And for the younger kids, if that means that they pull together, just like people used to do the carpools, well, you do home pools, right? Where kids are in one house one day and then another house another day. That gives the parents a little bit of a break, and it still allows your kids to get what they need. So again, these are difficult, unusual times, unprecedented times, and we have to function in a very different way than we have. And I think that is the big challenge, Charlie, because we tend to want to gravitate to the thing that's most familiar to us. And then we resist what's not familiar. And we got to shift that and realize, okay, this is a new norm. This is not familiar, but we can succeed in the midst of the storm.
Right. And
in the middle of a storm, we're leaving out of a storm, or we're going into one.
Right. And I think what people have to do, and you hit it, was assessing schools' precautions. Basically, you got to look at what the school is doing. And if you feel comfortable with what the school is doing, such as staggering schedules, making sure they have straight, social distance measures in place. You're looking at their best evidence-based, when it comes down to safe practices, stuff like that. If your school does not have a safety plan or safe plan right now, then you might need to reconsider that, taking your kids to that school. And I know it's going to be a lot of movement this year. Some of my friends, like Lucinda, she took her kids out of New York school and her house in Sag, and they're going to school in Sag Harbor. So they can walk to school. They don't have to be on the bus. You don't have as many people in the, in the school system. So that's one thing. But everybody doesn't have that luxury to be able to do that. And especially here in New York, when you have 1.5 million kids going to school, because one, they need school for meals. A lot of kids out here are struggling. We still do have an unemployment issue. And parents do want their kids to go to school, but it's just that you don't know what that home life is like after experiencing what we experienced before. And we know kids carry germs,
And it's hard to keep the little ones, like the daycare ones, it's hard to keep them off from one another. They're constantly germ spreaders. But also I want to make a point for Charlie, the insecure homes, those homes where they have food insecurities, where the child abuse rates have gone up, where there's elevated domestic violence, where kids are experiencing violence, communities where there's a lot of gun violence. You saw, like, on July 4th weekend, there were murders everywhere. I feel like people were packing guns, like you carry your purse, your keys, you said, your wallet, your mask, and your gun. And, people were being shot. 6 children were shot, right? July 4th weekend, and killed. I think Ricky Smiley's daughter was killed. She wasn't killed. She was shot in the leg. Just drive-by shooting, if you will.
Right.
So there's a lot of tension. I'm calling these homes are tinder boxes. And we do need to figure out, for those homes where they may not be in a position to have what I'm talking about, a courageous conversation about, and have a plan A, B, and C. That's where the larger community we have to put our heads together to attend to those kids in those communities that are insecure in multiple ways and do not have the same advantages of other families.
True, true. And I agree with you 100%. And I think that's something that I know Cuomo is working on here because he has to deal with New York City and trying to get people back to school. They've been very methodical about, even with the reopening, we in phase 3, but they exempt, they took restaurant in-room dining, not in-room dining, but in indoor dining, excuse me.
Okay, the indoor dining. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they, because they realize it's best just to be outdoors and to be able to do that. So they made provisions there. So everywhere they're making provisions that's, taking over parking lots for restaurants so they can move into the street. It's just, you don't know what's going to happen come fall. You can't have a restaurant outside come inclement weather. So it's just a lot of the unknowns and us doing a lot of bobbing and a lot of weaving. I was reading the other day also too about a parent that was really concerned about, and I think something we don't talk about and we kind of forget, if you don't have a child that is fully functioning and maybe autistic or maybe disabled, those really are stressing parents out, because the woman was saying that her autistic son, even though he's 9 years old, he reads on a he's a 3-year-old level, but he misses that interaction, and he needs that stimuli of being able to go to school and to go to his teacher and going to school. He keeps saying, "I want to go to school," when he looks at the computer screen, because he's not, he can't interact, and his mom can't tell him why he can't interact, and he doesn't understand it, being that he's autistic. So, do you have anybody like that you've come across in your practice that has to deal with those type of issues?
Yeah, I certainly have families that have children with special needs, and that is a specific challenge, because I find that those families are very resourceful. However, they also deal with another layer of exhaustion and fatigue, and I think that it can be helpful if those persons who know that those families have that extra layer of challenge, if we can reach out to them and say, hey, I'll take your kid and maybe do some routine things if the child is open and willing, because sometimes they don't, but if you're a family member or they know you're social distancing enough and during your quarantine, reach out to those families if you can, that are specifically challenged with those extra layers of children with special needs, because on a regular day, on a good day, they are typically exhausted. And no one expects that they will have a child with special needs, or they will have to deal with, and some of them are sandwiched in between elderly or senior parents, and it's just a lot. I would also make the case for those parents to do their necessary work to try to take care of themselves, whatever self-care mechanisms that they can utilize to help them to not be so wound up, if you will, because I have seen situations where very good, well-meaning parents, they'll snap on their kids, or they'll have an outlash because they're overwhelmed. So the better you can take care of yourself, whether it's music or meditation or mindfulness or reading or whatever soothes you, even sun on a nice day, just taking a quick walk can be really helpful to recenter yourself. And then also utilizing those techniques for your child can be really helpful.
I think one thing too, what adults need to realize with going to school, I think every parent, just because your child is a child, need to make sure that they get a physical. Because you always hear the situation where you have a child that's playing on sport and they didn't know they had a heart situation or whatever, and they would fall out, and then all of a sudden they pass away, or whatever the case may be. But I think you really want to assess your kids' health as well, before you put them back into the school system, to see if they are suffering from anything, and just make
They
sure.
have any underlying conditions that you don't know about.
Yeah, because we do have a lot of, unfortunately, today there are a lot of unhealthy kids. You know, we have a lot of kids suffer from obesity. There's too much sugar in our system. It was one of Michelle Obama's big thing of really wanting to get kids fit, get them back in shape. Once they took PE, physical education, out of school, and a lot of the electives away from school, kids suffer and they sit around and they're more sedentary. In addition, we know a lot of these kids play a lot of video games, so they're not as active as they used to be anymore. So those, and I think that's what you're finding in a lot of the issues that are affecting the kids is due to the fact that some of these kids fall under those categories.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
really,
Yeah. I feel like the kids, you know, a lot of times if you look at the parents and the level of health and well-being of the parents, then you can make the correlation between the health and well-being of the children.
right. And then also diet. The diet.
Diet is huge. But I do find, like, you know, when people are dealing with elevated levels of stress, then there tends to be a desire to like utilize food for comfort. So then there's way too many carbs, way too little exercise, a recipe for disaster. I would also say, like, needs to be a courageous conversation, quite frankly, about grief. We haven't talked about that in a while, but you know, we're talking about going back to school, but I think that there hasn't been enough attention to how we as a community haven't yet grieved what we've experienced over the last 4 or 5 months, right? So I'm not talking the grief of the losses, right? We've had a lot of losses. We lost our community in many ways. We've lost our identity and how we function in many ways. We've lost our rituals in many ways because people aren't going on vacation like they normally would. We have not been able to have our rituals like going to funerals in the way that we normally do, or even going to a hospital or nursing home to see our loved ones. All of that has been stripped from us due to COVID-19, and our families are struggling. And what happens is we don't process that. We need to talk about that or talk it out so that we don't act it out. Because if we don't, then we begin to internalize those levels of grief and loss that turn into depression. You cannot function at your highest and optimal level when you're depressed. It just doesn't happen, right? Because it's about brain chemistry, and the chemistry that is going through our bodies is not really allowing us to like perform. So now you're talking about kids going back to school, whether they're in the classroom physically or online. If they're struggling with their own sense of grief, they're not going to be able to perform.
Correct. So Trina said, you know what, I might be comfortable with school protocol, but who knows what people are doing in their home, which I think that's the biggest anxiety. Especially, I mean, I hate to use New York as the test, but I just think New Yorkers really figured this thing out, and it affected us, like I said. So our protocols and systems, and it's become a part of the norm. It's not like it's something foreign to us. So I think New York will come out on the other side of this thing. Well, we have come out on the other side of this thing in a very tough, in a great place. But I think even moving forward, as we keep going, further and further, that we're going to be okay. It's just I'm worried about the rest of the country that didn't take it serious because they weren't impacted. So they just didn't hear and see what we saw here.
I think, Charlie, I agree with you that they didn't hear the sirens and they didn't feel that energy of who's in that ambulance or what have you, and the elevated death tolls. But we did see it from a distance, and many of us did not take it seriously. And it's very interesting what happens in the human mind, right? We actually can talk ourselves into any narrative that is congruent with the truth that we want to believe. And so I think that narrative for many people was, it's over there. It's not coming this way. It's not going to happen to us. We don't really need to do that. That's New York. They're different than us over here in Florida or us in California. And unfortunately, you got to go a little bit deeper to identify what that real resistance was about. Because wherever there's resistance, that's where the work needs to be done. And I
Right.
think their resistance was about the fact that they just did not want to let go or give up or lose out on their life. And in hindsight, it kind of flipped on them, and now they're going to lose out anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just it was as they say, delayed but not denied. They did, but the reverse of what that saying truly means. They did deny you getting in contact with it or it being in your neighborhood. It got there sooner or later. Okay, well, we're almost up at the top of the hour. Like I was saying, I think a lot of people. I'm going to post in the chat. I mean, in the when we get offline here, the article about. I think you guys should definitely take a look at it. It was 132 epidemiologists talking about what they will look at, and I think if you read through that, it will tell you exactly what you need to do in order to kind of take the anxiety down from a lot of people. Couple of things, definitely looking at the regional infection rate is key. They highlighted that, of course, waiting on a vaccine, some of them, that's what they said, assessing the school precautions, depending on if you needed childcare for your kids, that really drove a lot of the responses. Worried about children and their health, and then also assessing the adults' health. And then I love the things that you said of what we're struggling with, and that is the grief, excuse me, of identity, our rituals, our sense of community. Even you talked about funerals, but also marriages. I see that's coming back a little bit. People are doing social distance marriages, having small weddings instead of having all these people. They're having 20 people, which makes sense anyway.
Well, you know what's interesting, Charlie, that, with these rituals like weddings and celebrations and graduations, we are deserving of that. People work hard. But I also want to challenge people not to allow yourself to be guilted, right, into doing it if you don't feel comfortable. Because I think that we're still a community or people that we allow each other to influence one another's actions based on guilting. And if you're just not comfortable, do not make an excuse. Do not, feel badly about it. Just simply be okay with not being comfortable yet, then versus doing it and then regretting it because something bad happened and now you're wishing that you hadn't.
True.
And then, making a decision, really asking the appropriate questions. Who's going to be there? What is your system set up? And sometimes when you start asking those questions, people haven't thought it through. They might get a little upset with you, but it may save a life if they haven't really thought about those things, right?
Right.
And last thing I would say is therapy. Like for those parents that are, really anxious with their kids, if you are finding it difficult to communicate with your child or them communicating with you, there are mediators. We're out there. I'm not the only one. There's some really good therapists that are doing this work online, but seek mental health support. That's really important during a time like this.
And you would think by now that people would understand that we are like this is part of normalcy right now. You would think. However, you still have people not willing to assess, to adapt and adjust, to accept their new normal. But because it's not going away, it is what it is. We are in it, but the whole process of denying it, you can see people who want to fight it and people who don't. So surround yourself with good people and make sure you keep social distancing, washing your hands, wear your mask, and I think we'll be okay. We'll get on the other side.
Absolutely. We will get on the other side. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Good conversation.
Yeah. Thank kids. Thank you guys for joining the show. We'll be in tomorrow with my guest, Ms. Tanya Vancourt, and we're talking all African-American kids starting their financial literacy with the new app that she has called Goal Setter, which is all about savings in the Black community, and we're partnering up with, different type of African American banks. Like Netflix just sent their money to African. Yeah. So anyway, tune in tomorrow. See you guys tomorrow night, and see you next week. All right.
Love you. Bye.
Let the sun shine. Let the sun